Keir Starmer recently faced an uncomfortable moment marked by alcohol and public humiliation from an angry crowd. This speech, which was meant to garner support, backfired dramatically, sparking outrage instead. What was intended to be a persuasive address quickly turned into a cause for backlash as the crowd reacted negatively. The situation escalated, leading to a wave of disapproval from those in attendance. The incident has raised questions about what exactly was said that triggered such an intense response and shifted the atmosphere from applause to widespread outrage. Let's examine the details of this unexpected turn of events.
While I understand calls for a ceasefire at this stage, I do not believe that it is the correct position now, for two reasons. One, because a ceasefire always freezes any conflict in the state where it currently lies. And as we speak, that would leave Hamas with the infrastructure and the capability to carry out the sort of attack we saw on October the 7th. Attacks that are still on.
Kissa, once a rising star in the labor movement, now sees his glory days slipping away. It's like watching a star athlete struggle to return to peak form. Upon arriving in Southport, he probably expected a warm welcome, especially as the labor leader. However, the reality was starkly different. As soon as he began speaking, the atmosphere shifted, the energy in the room disappeared, and uncomfortable glances exchanged among the crowd revealed disbelief. Frustration and disappointment grew, spreading through the audience. Stein News has uncovered for the first time how Telegram networks fueled the unrest, with riots organized through encrypted messages. During the initial event, the most widely shared content on Telegram stirred unrest. This wasn't Southport's first labor gathering. When Jeremy Corbyn took the stage, the crowd hung on every word. But with Kissa, it was a different story. It felt like watching a comedian bomb during a set. Every line was met with awkward silence instead of applause, and the audience seemed indifferent. Even the Labour MPs present appeared uncomfortable, as if they wished they could disappear. The stark contrast to Corbyn's captivating presence highlighted just how far Kissa's appeal had faded with the crowd. One MP practically hid behind his notepad, while another clutched her phone like a lifeline. No words were needed. Their expressions spoke volumes. It was a disaster. So, what did Kissa say that turned the crowd against him? He launched into his economic policies, believing he was delivering a masterclass. In reality, it felt like he was speaking a foreign language. The disconnect was impossible to ignore. His conviction quickly transformed into confusion, and the frustration in the room grew, making it clear that the audience was lost and no longer engaged. The speech fell flat.
With a roundup of the developments today in the case of the Southport incident that saw 3 little girls stabbed to death at a Taylor Swift-themed dance class. The suspect in that case is 18-year-old Axel Rudakabana. Today, police announced that he was facing 2 new charges.
The 2 further offences relate to evidence obtained by Merseyside police during searches of Axel Rudakabana's home address as part of a lengthy and complex investigation which has been ongoing since the 29th of July. The additional charges are the production of a biological toxin, namely ricin, contrary to Section 1 of the Biological Weapons Act 1974, and possession of information, namely a PDF file entitled Military Studies in the Jihad Against the Tyrants, the Al-Qaeda Training Manual, likely to be useful to a person committing or preparing to commit an act of terrorism.
Okay.
And then it happened, the first loud boo. It cut through Starmer's attempt to present his economic vision like a dam breaking. A voice from the back shouted a sharp, unmistakable boo, as if representing the entire room. From that moment on, the floodgates opened. Each sentence he spoke was met with groans and more boos. The atmosphere shifted quickly as people began getting up and walking out, unable to endure the discomfort any longer. The event, which was supposed to showcase his leadership, turned into a spectacle of rejection. The mood quickly shifted from discomfort to outright hostility, with disappointment thick in the air. But what truly stood out was Starmer's expression, genuinely stunned, as if he never imagined the crowd could turn on him. Let's be honest, he brought this on himself. It's as though he forgot the golden rule of politics: know your audience. In Southport, he missed the mark completely. From start to finish, the event was a disaster, making you question how someone can rise so high in politics only to stumble so badly. And this wasn't just one bad speech. Remember when Starmer was staunchly pro-second referendum? In 2016, he fought for the Remain cause, pushing for a public vote on the final Brexit deal. But then he abruptly reversed course, telling the crowd that Labour needed to move. Remain Labour members felt like Starmer had just pulled the rug out from under them. Says Keir Starmer, "The events today are truly awful, and I know the entire country is deeply shocked by what they've seen and heard. I speak for everyone when I say that our thoughts and condolences are with the victims, their families, friends, and the wider community. It's nearly impossible to fathom the grief and trauma they're enduring, and people are desperate for answers. During his Southport speech, Starmer was interrupted 5 times while discussing Brexit. This wasn't just pushback, it was an outright rebellion. The shock on his face was evident. He couldn't understand why his own supporters were turning on him. As a whole is quietly distancing itself from its previous positions. Starmer even paid tribute to Jeremy Corbyn, who many now see as a distant figure. When asked about freedom of movement and Labour's position on borders, Starmer seemed to contradict his earlier stance. His responses to controversial topics like Israel's actions or his media interactions are also raising eyebrows. Labour members are venting their frustrations on social media, and this isn't just idle chatter. These issues could have serious electoral consequences for Starmer and the party, says Stephen Barrett. I don't believe the state should have the power to end lives, which is why I oppose so-called assisted dying. But cases like this make me question everything. The man's actions are pure evil, and what he did to those girls is beyond grotesque. I can't even begin to imagine their suffering. It's monstrous. Any decent person hearing those details would be in tears. Starmer, on the other hand, seems to just follow procedure, sticking to what he thinks the rules say. That's not humanity, that's what a robot does. We have AI for that. And his chancellor isn't much better, resembling something out of Buck Rogers or Twiki. Now, Labour's once strong pro-Brexit base is slipping away, and who can blame them? If you're a committed Brexit supporter, why stay with a party that's brushing off one of the biggest political battles of the decade? But it gets worse. Just when Starmer seemed to have hit rock bottom, he dug himself deeper, this time by praising Donald Trump. Yes, the same Trump Labour has spent years condemning. It's almost as if Starmer is trying to completely rewrite Labour's foreign policy overnight. What is he hoping to gain from this? News America. Starmer takes a call from Trump, and instead of keeping it professional or holding him accountable like past Labour leaders, he praises Trump's role in Gaza. Yes, the same Trump that Starmer and Labour once condemned as a disaster for international relations. Now Starmer is positioning himself as a peacemaker. Did he really think this would make him appear diplomatic? In reality, it's had the opposite effect. Gordon Brown opposes it, as does the Archbishop of Canterbury, with Angela Rayner calling it obscene. Even Jonathan Ashworth described it as heinous. Then there's Nigel Farage, who has taken the lead on this issue, criticizing Starmer for not funding his manifesto properly. Farage may not have fully funded his own, but at least he's clear about it. Starmer, on the other hand, insists everything in Labour's manifesto is costed and funded, although he acknowledges they may have to abandon some commitments to avoid further economic damage. Labour supporters, particularly on the left, are outraged. They believe Starmer is abandoning the party's core values, accusing him of throwing Labour's traditional foreign policy stance out the window. This isn't just a minor mistake, it's a complete reversal of how previous Labour leaders, including Corbyn, handled Trump, says Donald Trump. During a recent conversation, Trump referred to Prime Minister Keir Starmer in a derisive manner, mocking his speech and suggesting he was a big supporter of Trump. This bizarre exchange only adds to the growing controversy surrounding Starmer's stance. It's a sharp contrast to figures like Jeremy Corbyn, who refused to attend a state banquet with Trump, or Sadiq Khan, who publicly condemned Trump's Muslim ban. Even Tony Blair, despite his own controversies, handled Trump with more caution. With Starmer, he's practically rolling out the red carpet for Trump. This shift in approach doesn't just look bad, it risks seriously alienating Labour's progressive voters. Labour has long positioned itself as the party standing against figures like Trump. But now, many of those who once trusted the party are beginning to feel abandoned by Starmer's actions. News by America. Once hailed as Labour's savior, Keir Starmer is now facing a full-blown mutiny. It's not just the left turning against him, centrists are abandoning him too. MPs are sharpening their knives and whispers of a leadership challenge are spreading. Meanwhile, Labour's approval ratings are free-falling, and even in their traditional strongholds, voters are slipping away. This is more than just a policy crisis, it's a leadership meltdown. Unless Starmer can pull off a miraculous recovery, Labour may be headed toward an electoral disaster so severe that Southport will seem like a minor issue. The real question now is whether Labour can bounce back or it will crumble under the weight of Starmer's missteps. In light of these dangerous times, I want to make it clear. The idea that we must choose between our allies America or Europe is completely wrong. I reject it entirely.